A big thank you to all of my listeners. And if you would like to support this transmission even more and boost your trading account, go to trendfollowing.com/now. And without any further delay, on to today's show. This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Coveil. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. Before I get into my guest today, for you slackers out there that have not helped this podcast along by going into the iTunes system and writing a review, whether you hate me, Michael Coveil, or whether you love me, Michael Coveil, just go write something. This damn review process is part of the process of landing great guests. Don't ask me why. I didn't create it, but I have to play by the rules. Real simple. Covel.com/iTunes. Covel.com/iTunes. Takes you right to my iTunes page. It only takes you 2 seconds. Get a review up. Thank you in advance. My guest today doesn't need much introduction in the field of publishing. A man who has sold millions and millions of books. His second appearance on my show. Today, we're not really talking about a book that he's written, but we're talking about an entrepreneurial venture that he has started, which frankly is something I'm a little jealous, a little envious of, that I did not think of, that I did not launch. But I give Tucker Max credit for this great idea. If you have any interest in writing a book, Tucker Max has put together an entrepreneurial venture that can help. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Tucker Max. Tucker, in 2002, assuming that I knew you were the real deal, assuming that I knew this idea, this business that you have now, assuming that I knew that it would work, I sure as hell would have bit the bullet and given you my money. Because I have to tell you, I probably spent far more money, much more, doing what I did, and it didn't work. And then I had to go the long haul process of actually learning how to write. Because I thought I was going to take all this information and give it to someone else, and it just didn't work that way. So why don't I let you explain to the audience this great idea? Because it really is a great idea. I'm not here to endorse or tell anybody it's fantastic or this or that, but I think you're really onto something.
You know, the embarrassing part, Michael, is that I started writing in 2002. And if I had been smarter than I am, I think there's nothing that would have stopped me from doing this then. And I had to do the same thing you did. I had to learn how to write to get all my books done. So basically, here's how it works. I have a company called Book in a Box. I was at this entrepreneur dinner, and this woman basically came up to me and said, I want to write a book, but I don't have any time. I run a business. I can't sit at a keyboard for a year typing out my knowledge and my ideas. So I was like, well, you're asking me how to write a book without writing it. And she's like, yeah, kind of. And so, of course, being the snobby, elitist writer that I am, I made fun of her and criticized her and everyone wants to be famous. No one wants to put in the work and blah, blah, blah. And which was, of course, ridiculous because this woman has done 10 times more in her life than I have. And so she kind of called me out. She's like, look, we're at an entrepreneur dinner. Are you going to help me solve my problem or just lecture me about hard work? I was like, all right.
I'm sure I've done that shit too. I'm sure I've done that.
I 100%. What's worse is that I hate the snobby elitist writers. Because those people were the worst to me when I started writing. And then I turn around and act like them. It was the worst. I was so embarrassed. Not because she was right. I was embarrassed because I was acting like the type of person I hate. Anyway, so I basically became obsessed with this idea. How do I get a book out of her head without her having to actually be the one at the keyboard typing it out? And long story short, what I realized was something that is actually really obvious when you think about it. Most of the great thinkers in Western history did not write their books. I mean, think about Jesus wrote nothing down. His apostles did. Socrates wrote nothing down. Plato did. Buddha, Malcolm X, Winston Churchill, Marco Polo. You go down the list of some of the greatest thinkers in Western history, and a scribe wrote their words down. They were just the ones who thought of them and spoke them. And then it's like it all came to me in an instant, and I felt even dumber because, like we said at the beginning, I could have done this 10 or more years ago. And so I basically cobbled a process together where we would interview her and get all of her ideas out of her head and then turn them into a book. But the important part is that you can't just interview someone. If you just talk to somebody for a while, it's not a book, right? Like if you transcribed all of your podcasts and put them in a book, it would be awful to read because there would be no sort of coherent message. They wouldn't read right on the page. It wouldn't be structured right. So what I did was just create a simple algorithmic process where like I realized, okay, I understood what do we have to do to sort of position her book, and then how do we structure it, and then how do we outline it, and then how do we get interview her to get everything out of her head, and then how do we translate, then we transcribe it, and then how do we get that transcription into book prose. And so for each process, I just kind of created essentially a feedback loop to make sure everything was right before we moved to the next step. And I'll be honest, Michael, I didn't think this was going to work. And then it worked. She was like blown away. She's like, this is amazing. This is everything I wanted in my voice, in my book. I went on, Lewis Howes. I mean, he's a friend of yours. That's right. I went on his podcast halfway through this process with Melissa when we knew it was working. And he's very dyslexic. And he had just finished writing his book that just came out, School of Greatness. He was telling me all the problems he had on it. We were talking about that. And I was like, oh man, I wish you had told me this. We're kind of doing this new process with this woman and it's really cool. And here's how it works. And he was blown away. He's like, that's so awesome. I wish I had known, blah, blah, blah. He said, what do you call it? And Zach and I, it was my co-founder, Zach Oberon. We didn't have a name. This was just something we were doing for a random woman who I met in an entrepreneur dinner. And we jokingly said, like a week later, this is a book in a box. I told him, I don't know, we call it book in a box. And he's like, oh, what a cool name, blah, blah, blah. And so then we just went on with the podcast. And I get an email the next day asking me, where is this book in a box on the internet? I want to sign up. And I knew his podcast hadn't gone up. So I was like, I wrote back, I'm like, who the hell is this? It turned out to be the sound engineer, the editor of his podcast. And I was like, Zach, we need to put up a landing page because this might actually end up doing something.
Sound engineers are privy to a lot of early stuff.
I know, right? But I didn't think he was going to buy. We put the page up. Not only did he buy a package, we ended up selling like $200,000 worth of packages off of one podcast and then referrals off of that. I've been involved in a lot of businesses and done a lot of things. Some have done well, some have not. I've never been involved in something personally like that took off so quickly. It was like the definition of product market fit. Like, you've done something when you're selling it before you're really even offering it.
It's a fun feeling because here you're doing something, you're making money out of it. Look, you're a capitalist. I mean, that's the way it works. But to have that where people are going to get that benefit, that's the extra motivation.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing, man.
So listen, I had just randomly, before this even came up, an idea of even reaching out to you, I had a friend reach out to me. He wanted to connect with you, some of the other cohorts, and I kind of probed him a little bit. And well, what do you want to connect about? And he said, well, this business they have. I said, well, so I looked it up, and I said, well, dude, just give him the money and go give it a shot. It's because he can afford it. I said, just give it a shot. And I think that I bring that up because I think we're going to tear apart the whole process here of your thinking. But I did feel some resistance. Now, I spent probably 3 times as much money in the year of 2002 going in circles. So why don't you talk about the price point? Because to me, if I was in that situation where I've got the ideas in my head, I don't have the writing skill, and I now can work with this team that can help me do what you say you're going to do, if I can get that for the price point that I think, I don't want to make sure I got the right price point, but for the right price point, it's a home run. And I want you to lead into also, because the big picture here is the benefit to saying, when someone says to you, what do you do? I'm an author. That benefit is freaking huge.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so these are two different discussions. The price point is on the site. It's $20,000 for our sort of basic price point. That's what I think 90% of our authors use. We have another that's 50,000, which sort of we call it like the sort of comprehensive or the ultimate publishing experience. So it's includes an audio book, it includes developmental editing, a bunch of other stuff. Most people don't need that though. So 20 grand is the price point. Yeah, dude, it really. Well, I think we've signed 230 or 40 authors at this point, and maybe about 50 books are out, and the rest are in the process.
That's really cool. I mean, seriously. I mean, look, I'm sure somebody's going to say out there, Mike, you're just promoting this thing Tucker's got. Look, I've lived this. If I would have had the opportunity to do this, I would have given you my freaking money.
I don't play the promotion game, right? So what we've actually done is we wrote a book that describes our process, exactly the process we use with the templates that we use, the exact instructions. And you can either buy it on Amazon for $5 or $10, or you can actually go to our site and download it for free. bookinabox.com/book. If 20 grand is too much, if you think that's ridiculous, you guys are welcome. Any of your listeners are welcome to read the book and do it themselves. Anyone can.
Of course, yeah.
The reason you want us to do it is if your time is really valuable, because what you're buying is your time and our expertise. Because the process itself, once we explain it, is actually really straightforward. I don't want to say it's simple. The big uncertainty with most people with books is they don't know what to do. They don't know where to start. And even once they start, they don't know, what are the steps, right? And so it's sort of think about for working out. If you don't know anything about weights or movement or anything, you want to be in shape, but you don't even know what the hell you're doing or where to even start. So you hire a trainer who tells you what to do and kind of coaches you through the process. Or you can just buy Kelly Starrett's book or any number of other great books, and you can read those and learn yourself, right? And either way works. And it's sort of the same with us. What we did is kind of, I don't want to say we invented a process, because God knows the people who've been doing this for thousands of years were not really inventors. What we did is cobble together every specific thing we tell people to do, other people have understood. No one's ever put it together in one cohesive process that really was that had the intention of getting an idea out of a head and into a book without someone having to touch a keyboard.
Not ghostwriting. Let's clarify that.
Right. Okay, so that's the other point you brought up, is the resistance a lot of people have to this is they think it's ghostwriting. And ghostwriting is you're paying somebody, usually for even a half decent ghostwriter, you're starting about 30 or 40,000. It's usually actually for a good one, 75 to 100. You're paying someone, let's call it whatever, $100,000 to write their version of your ideas into a book, and then you get to put your name on it. I don't want to say that's bullshit, but if you're resistant,
it's bullshit.
I mean, if you're okay putting your name on someone else's thoughts and ideas that kind of resemble yours, then ghostwriting is great for you. But what our process is, I mean, for 20 grand, man, I'm not learning your business, and no one who works for me is either. All we're doing is getting your ideas out of your head and into your book in your voice.
You're facilitating.
That's it. Right. And it's actually a really big difference, because I'll tell you why. If you have stupid ideas or no ideas, ghostwriting works well for you, because the ghostwriter will just either do research or they'll make up their own ideas, right? If I wanted to write a book about how to, the right way to beat the market or something, I have no fucking idea how to beat the market. I'm not an investment person, but I could hire a ghostwriter who's probably ghostwritten a bunch of investment books, and they could write the Tucker Max Guide to generating wealth or whatever the hell. And it would be, it'd probably be just recycled nonsense. It would have nothing to do with me. But if you wanted to do that book, then use our process, then what would happen is that we would get your ideas out of your head, but we don't know anything about that. So it's not like we're not writing our ideas about trend trading.
You know what I like where you're going, though, also, is that with this particular business opportunity, so here we are having a conversation where people that might want to find you for this service can find you. But then what's also interesting is the entrepreneurial side of this equation, too. And ultimately, if you guys are going down the right path, you're going to be picking who you want to work with.
Oh, of course. Oh, absolutely. Well, because here's the thing. Our process doesn't work if you don't know what you're talking about. For real, our sales process is actually more of a qualification process. And we qualify really on two things. Well, I guess three things. Obviously, the money is the first thing, but we put our price on our site. So if you can't read, then you don't see the price, then yeah, we qualify for that. But people understand, they know themselves if they can afford that and if it makes sense for them. But then what we do look for then is, do they actually have an idea for a book? And they don't have to know it. A lot of people have a lot of stuff in their heads and they're not sure if it's a good idea for a book or not. We are actually really good at helping people understand that. And we'll tell people, if they don't have something that we can put into a book, we won't do the process, because our process doesn't work if we have to put ideas in your head or we have to write the content. It's got to be your content. The other thing we qualify for are assholes. Ironically enough, like we won't work with people who are really people who are, you know those people who.
Hold on, would a younger you have been hired?
No,
okay.
Not in a million years. Okay. Probably not. I would have been a pain in the ass to work with, and I would have been really demanding. And you know the people who I'm talking about, the ones who, as soon as they pay you, they think they own you, and they think you're their servant, and they think you can, right. Yeah, I'm just going to bark at you and tell you what to do, and give me my coffee, garçon. And those people are out the door, man. Life's too short to deal with those people.
I had an online business from 96 until 2004. Still have it, but it wasn't until 2004 when my first book came out that an interesting aspect of my life started to happen. And there really is something amazing that you could have a very successful enterprise, venture, whatever. But when you say you're an author, and this gets back to something I just mentioned a second ago, but when you say you're an author, something changes in the psyche of people. They stop. They want to listen. I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything. I'm just saying there's something there's a respect afforded to authors that really, when you start to think about price tags, what people really might not be thinking about. I mean, some people in the audience right now are saying 20 grand. I don't want to spend 20 grand to write a book. You have no earthly idea how much that might be worth when you're done.
Well, so here's the thing. Some people, I would say most people, I'm not sure, but probably the majority of people should not spend 20 grand to get their ideas into a book, either because they don't have anything to say or because they don't have any way to capture the value from that. But there is a set of people, like you said, that makes immense sense. Almost any C-level executive should have a book, because it's a major differentiator for you in your career, and it helps your company as well. People with books get asked to speak more. They get paid to speak more. They get seen as authorities. We actually, a bunch of our authors are women. I would say it's maybe 40%, and a bunch of female executives. And a big reason that they want books is because even though they really know their shit,
it's credibility.
Yeah. They're not good at talking about themselves and promoting themselves. What happens is when they have a book and they go into a meeting, men listen to them more, pay attention to them more. This is not me saying this. This is them telling us what happens. It was kind of shocking to me. I was like, really? People are like that? They're like, oh yeah, you wouldn't believe how much of a difference it makes. That's just for executives. For entrepreneurs, it's a huge lead gen for your business, and it's a huge mark of credibility. If you're trying to raise money, or if you're trying to get people to buy something from you, I mean, just think about what it did for me on this podcast when I said, you can go look up our process and do it yourself. You don't even have to buy from us. That's a big signal of not just authority, that I know what I'm talking about, but true credibility and competence. If I'm willing to share my method with the world and show the world exactly what we do totally transparently, then you get to judge for yourself whether you think I'm competent or not, which is a really authoritative signal to send to everyone, because that's the thing with a book. You can't really hide. You know, if you write a book that's full of nonsensical BS, people are going to know. And if you write a book that's really valuable and really amazing, people are going to know.
Absolutely. Let's jump into Amazon. And let's talk a little bit about marketing, because you and let's just call your close network of associates, other authors, names that people would know, and, not trying to kind of give you any brag points, but you guys have sold many millions of books. So there's some experience there. I mean, I'd like you to walk people through the process. But it's not just the authoring, the writing of the book. Well, actually, the authoring still staying in the hands of the author. It's the writing part you're doing. But it's not just the writing. You're taking people cradle to grave with some marketing insight as well, aren't you?
The first thing that we do at my company is, if you're a client, is, like I said, we walk you through positioning. And anyone will tell you, the people you're talking about, like my friends like Tim Ferriss or Ryan Holiday, or we go down the list, Lewis, like we talked about, they'll all tell you the most important marketing you do for your book starts before you write it. That is understanding the position of your book. And there's basically 3 steps to properly position your book. So first off, positioning means positioning in the marketplace. You can think of it like products. It's really no different than like where does let's say some product in Walmart, what shelf does it sit on? Like what position in the store is it in? It's the same thing. That's actually where the word positioning comes from, is what position in the bookstore does the book go in? So there's a 3-step process for positioning. Step 1 is understanding exactly what it is you want from the book. So you don't actually start with your book idea. What result are you trying to get from your book? And like a lot of people start with, oh, I want to be a famous best-selling author and sell millions of books. Aside from being totally unrealistic for almost everybody, that's actually a bad result, because the only way you're going to sell millions of books is by doing a broad-based book, and you've got to be really, really lucky, right? I mean, like, I sold millions of books because I had the exact right message at the exact right time. Tim Ferriss, same thing, exact right message at the exact right time. Very few people get that. And there are a lot of people who try. And so what happens is, if you make that your goal, then you're just not going to hit it, and you're probably not going to get it.
The odds are against you. Look at the statistics. It's not there. Yeah. The goal has to be for another purpose.
Exactly. It's got to be something very specific for you. So, for example, if you're an executive and you want to write a book to help your career, totally plausible. If you're an entrepreneur and you want to write a book to generate leads for your company, it's a great idea. If you're a thought leader, or you want to become a thought leader and a speaker, writing a book is what's going to put you on the map. If you're a consultant or a coach or anything like that, if you're in any way, shape, or form selling training or anything like that at all, a book is really going to establish you as an authority and give you credibility and be able to not just be in the business, but charge more and do more, right? So for people like that, I'll give you a great example. The woman who called me out that started the company, she specializes in pop-up retail, and she wanted to write a book. She thought she had to write a book about overall retail and make it like really applicable to everybody. And I was like, first off, no one cares about retail outside of the retail space. So instead of doing that, I was like, why don't you go the opposite way and go deep into your niche? And she specializes in pop-up retail for fashion brands. And so she wrote the definitive book about that subject. And what happened was, even though she sold, that was like 2 years ago, give or take, year and a half, she sold less than 1,000 copies. But she's made, I think, 3 or 4 million off of the book. She tripled her incoming leads to her business and signed 2 massive 7-figure deals with huge mall companies because of that book. And the only people who read it are like high-level executives at retail companies. But that's her entire audience. Those are the only people who buy anything from her, because she's, like a high-level consultant in pop-up retail. And so it didn't matter if people like me and you had any idea who she was, because there's nothing we can buy from her, right? And so that's what we really help people focus on, and what anyone should do writing a book, with or without us. What result do you want from this book? In fact, and it should be phrased actually differently. What result must you have for this book to be a success? Right? Because we'd all like to sell millions of copies and be bestsellers, but what do you have to make the book a success? Now, once you understand that, then you can be able to answer the second question. What audience must I reach to achieve that result? So in Melissa's case, she had to reach the 1,000 to 2,000 thought leaders and influencers and decision makers in retail. That was the only audience she had to reach to get her result. Anything above that was bonus. And don't say, everyone wants to say, oh yeah, everybody's the audience for my book. That's bullshit. Not even the Bible's audience is everybody. There's no book that has an audience of everybody. Believe it or not, the more narrow you are with your audience, the more likely you'll write a book that'll get you the result you want. Because it's really easy to market to small niche audiences, because very few people write to small niche audiences. And then the third thing you have to understand is, what do you have to say that is interesting and valuable to the audience you're trying to reach? Right? Because that's where most people want to start, is their idea. That's actually the third thing. Because if you know something that is interesting and valuable to the audience you want to reach, then you'll be able to reach them with your book, and you'll get the result you want. That's the 3-step process.
How important is word of mouth, the viral aspect of all of this? You've got to do something great. I mean, look, if you guys were just tossing out, regurgitated interviews with correcting some grammar and stuff, this would never work. It's got to be damn good or none of it flies.
Notice how you asked a question about marketing and I talked about positioning, because all your marketing is essentially determined by your positioning. So if you do a really broad book of trying to apply retail to everybody, in Melissa's case, then how's she going to reach that audience? There's almost no way. Nothing is ever going to make me care about retail, nor you probably, right? So instead of trying to be a broad book, she went narrow. To get in front of tastemakers and decision makers in retail is actually really easy. There's a couple shows they watch and a couple things they read. And so she just had to, because her book is about her subject, it was really easy for her to get covered in, I don't even know the names, Retail Weekly or whatever it's called, right? And the same is true for almost anybody. It's really easy to market to a specific niche if you are telling them something they want to know and is interesting to them. Marketing is almost simple. And from that point, it all becomes word of mouth. It's not super hard to get a pop of attention in an audience. What's hard is to sustain attention. The reason is because most stuff is boring and stupid and not relevant to the audience.
Speak to what I've been seeing on Amazon in the business books, the self-help space, whatever you want to call it. I've noticed in the last couple years, maybe it's a little bit longer than that, it seems like there's a lot of this optimized mumbo jumbo, and you're lucky if you really only have maybe 30 or 40 words in this whole book that are worth anything, and it's just to tout some URL to sell some piece of baloney. It's absolutely nonsensical. Why don't you speak to people out there that might be thinking, I can just hack this, I can just do something, and it'll just be the secret to sell something. That's not what you guys are doing. You guys are actually, helping a thought leader put a solid piece of writing together is an entirely different proposition.
It is. If you're looking to use a book as a cheap, easy lead gen for a video course, you don't want us. You can go buy the couple $1,000 video courses about this or whatever. It's like, I feel like all the info marketers just market to, it's sort of like there's a pyramid. There's the really smart ones at the top, and then there's the ones below that buy their courses to try and sell people to the ones below that. It's just a giant pyramid scheme of nonsense. That stuff really peaked a few years ago, and it's kind of on the downhill because Amazon has tweaked their algorithms to make it harder and harder for BS to rise to the top. No, this is not for people. If you just want to make crap to sell crap, you don't want to work with us.
Talk about search for a moment. We were just talking about Amazon, and I saw you in another interview make the comment about Amazon. Of course, I would instinctively know this, but I don't know if I would think about saying it. How important, we start to think, what are the #1 search engines on this planet? Because search is still a huge thing. I wouldn't be talking to you without freaking search engines. But Amazon is a damn important search engine.
Yeah, this is crazy, dude. So Google's the biggest search engine. The #2 is actually shocking to a lot of people. #2 is Yahoo. And then I think, depending on who you're talking to, sometimes Bing is 3, and sometimes they go back and forth between 3 and 4. At worst, the 4th biggest search engine on the internet is Amazon. And when you think about it, it makes sense, because if you want to buy something, at this point, you don't really start at Google anymore. Usually you start at Amazon. If Amazon doesn't have it, then you go Google it. But Amazon also has another huge benefit. If you are looking for a professional, most people start at Amazon, not Google. Think about it. Like, if I'm looking for the best way for an entrepreneur to understand taxes, if I type something like entrepreneurial taxes into Google, it's going to be a mess of nonsense. There's no way I'm going to be able to understand even what I should start reading. So where do I go? I go to Amazon. And what do? If you're like me, I look at books on tax law or taxes and entrepreneurship, which I just went through this like 6 months ago. And I find the people that wrote the books on it, and I find the book that looks the most, probably I buy like 5 or 10 books of the ones that look the most credible, have the most reviews, seem like they really understand what they're talking about. And I browse each of them. And then the one that I think is the smartest, I actually go find that person and contact them, because I don't want to have to read the entire book and learn everything and do all the work. I'm looking for who the expert is to hire them to do the work for me. If you have money, that's generally what you do. is you look for experts, and Amazon is at this point has become the search engine for experts and professionals.
Hopefully people are paying attention as we talk about this, but finding you, and when people go searching for anything, it's just like what you just said in terms of having a book. It's like light bulbs should be going off. People should be saying, oh my God, that's such a simple thought. Having a book, Amazon search engine, my God, why am I waiting?
Well, I mean, it depends. If you have a business that relies in some way, shape, or form on inbound attention, I can't think of a better way to sort of create that than a book. And then beyond that, a book is a hook for all kinds of media attention. Someone like you, for example, I'm sure whenever you do other podcasts or other sort of media, you talk about your book and people ask you, oh, tell me about, trend trading or whatever. And like, I saw your book, or even if they haven't read the book is the hook. The book is the reason that you're on the podcast, the reason that you're the expert or on the TV show or whatever. And then you talk about it and explain it. So if you're in any sort of business at all where you need attention, either for yourself or for what you do, a book is one of the best, if not the very best way to get that attention.
No, I just do the podcast because now as I'm becoming a grown-up, I want to be Charlie Rose. Seriously, I don't even know. The podcast, generally, most of the time, I'm interviewing guests that have absolutely nothing to do with trading just because it freaking intrigues me. That's what's fun for me. I mean, look, it's right. You having multiple subjects, digging into things, we all do this in our life on a daily basis. So if you're lucky enough to talk to the people that really do all these things and are so freaking passionate in their life, are in the middle of it, and they want to talk to me, I'm just going to keep talking.
I could not agree more.
Hey, listen, I don't want to steal your thunder on terms of the exact questions, but I think it'd be really cool to walk the audience through some of your inventory process, your inbound process. Somebody signs up with you. They want to jump in. I mean, someone out there right now is thinking, God, this sounds like a really cool process. And I'll tell you what, if a bunch of people come from this freaking podcast, I want at least dinner. But talk about some of those early questions you might ask. How you, like I said, not to steal and do a full inventory here, but just whet people's appetite for what you guys start to pull out of people.
It's a great question. I already went through the first three questions, which are what result do you want? What audience do you need to reach to get that result? And what do you know that's interesting and valuable to that audience? Those are the three first questions we ask and the most important questions. Once we have those answers, then generally what that is the positioning of the book. We try to structure it. We only do nonfiction, obviously, with this process. It doesn't work with fiction. But with nonfiction, almost all of the books we do are sort of instructional nonfiction where people who know something or understand how to do something teach that to the audience. The way we do is this, the basic way we structure books, I would say about 80% of our books are structured this way, is we walk through the process of like you teaching me. Like if I was the person who does this on my team, the role is called a book developer. They go through those first three questions and they nail positioning. And then they basically get you to, in a loose form, walk them through the process of teaching them what you know. And so that creates the structure of the book. What's the first thing I have to know? What's the second thing? What's the third thing? Literally the steps you would have to go through to learn this and then do it. And so that's the structure. And then from there, we take the structure and create the outline. And what the outline essentially, the difference between outline and structure is that it's just filled in. We basically create chapters out of the structure, and then under each chapter, or sections, parts of the book, it kind of depends on what we're talking about. Under each one, what we do is we try to come up with stories from the author's life or stories that they know that can explain principles or things they're trying to teach. We actually come up with question prompts. Once the book developer understands what they're teaching, then they kind of think up, okay, what are the questions I have to ask them to get them to explain this? What are the stories I want them to tell? What are the examples that they need to give to really explain this? The outline is actually not really for the author so much. It outlines the book very clearly. It's usually 5 to 10 pages, and it kind of goes into detail about everything that will be in the book and all the stories and all the examples and all the information. But it's more of a set of prompts, because at that point, that's the book developer's job. Once the book developer is done, then the author moves to the what we call an editor. But what they really are is more of an interviewer. And they're usually professional journalists. Like we have a couple Emmy Award winners, we have 2 Emmy Award winning writers, 1 Pulitzer Prize winning writer, a journalist, and they take the outline and they interview the authors off of the outline, basically going straight down. And their job is to sort of almost act as the advocate for the reader, because they're trying to get everything you know about this subject out of your head and onto the audio recording. In a way that they can understand and they can relate to. Because these are smart people who don't know anything about what your book is about. And so they're trying to get everything out of your head. Once that's done, it's then recorded. It's already recorded, the whole thing. And then it's all transcribed. And then the transcription is kind of put in outline, because it's already in outline format. The journalist then goes back, and they don't really edit the transcript into writing, because if you guys understand, neurologically, speaking and writing actually are totally different neurological cognitive processes that use different parts of the brain. So what they do is, instead of trying to edit it, they actually sort of rewrite it. It's not the journalist's words, though, the editor's words. It's your words, and it's your voice, and it's your ideas. What they do is they try and keep your voice and your words and your content. They just make it flow smoothly, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, so it's easy to read on the page. Once they do that, then it goes back to you. And we kind of have 2 ways to edit. Someone like you probably would really want to just get a Word file and dig into the manuscript, which is what we do with maybe about half to 2/3 of the authors. And then some authors literally don't want to touch a keyboard. So we actually have an editing process for that. What we do for them is we send them a physical printed out copy of the rough draft of their manuscript, and they read it out loud. They get back on the phone with their editor and they read their book out loud. And it sounds super weird, but this is a trick that I learned, and pretty much all big authors learn. Like Neil Strauss does this, Tim does this. We read the book out loud, because when you read your own writing out loud, you hear the problems, even if you don't know how to fix them. So the author will read the writing and they'll say, oh yeah, that's phrasing is wrong, or I don't like this, or whatever. And they'll give the edits to them, and the editor will, like sort of on the phone, talk through how to fix it. The editor will mark everything, and the editor goes back and fixes it, sends it back to the author for final approval, and then manuscript is locked. And from there, we go through the whole publishing process, which is the big thing, man, for publishing, is making sure it looks really professional. So it's great interior design, great book cover, really good, book description, good author bio, a good author picture, all those things that make a book look professional.
Walk me through, if it exists, and I'm curious about the traditional publishing industry, any criticism, any fight back, any pushback, or has there been any kind of a symbiotic relationship with publishers? Because publishers, and I've seen you say this, publishers are more in the venture capital side of things, where you're more in the picks and axes supplying to the gold rushers. Why don't you talk about the relationship with traditional publishers, if it exists, and why don't you talk about your business model aspect there too on what I just mentioned?
Yeah, so a lot of people think that we are disruptive to traditional publishing. I am no fan of the traditional publishing business, but I don't think we're competitive with them. I know it sounds weird, but here's why. Because most of the people who come to us are very successful, very intelligent professionals, but their books are pretty niche books. Like the one I was telling you about pop-up retail. Melissa would probably never get a traditional book publishing deal, because they know there's only 1,000 to even at best 5,000 people who are ever going to buy her book. So the way Simon & Schuster makes money, or any other traditional publisher, is by selling copies of the book. Melissa cares about influence and thought leadership and credibility and authority. She doesn't need to sell a ton of copies as long as the right people buy copies. Most of our authors are people like that, who care far more about indirect ROI than direct ROI. But that being said, I would say about 10% of our authors are people who either have traditional book deals or could get traditional book deals. We're working with a couple of people like Steve Sims and Joey Coleman and people like that who actually have already signed traditional deals with publishers. They're just doing their manuscript with us and not the publishing. Because like Steve is a great example. He's really dyslexic. If he has to write something, it's like a disaster. But he's a brilliant guy who runs this incredible company, Bluefish. It's all relationship based, and he does these amazing things. but he can't write. And he didn't want to hire a ghostwriter because he felt like a ghostwriter would just screw up his voice. So he hired us. We did the manuscript, and then we actually connected him with an agent who got him a book deal. So we'll work with traditional publishers. There's no problem with that. And then we have a couple of other people who don't want us to mention that we work with them that you probably know. And then what we also do is we'll do the entire thing for people who are big, because what they want is to own the rights and royalties. So with our service, you own everything. You're paying us a fee and you own everything, so you can do anything you want with your book. You can give it away for free as a lead gen, you can change it, you can syndicate it, you can do a million things. Whereas if you have a traditional publishing deal, you cannot do that. They make their money by selling copies of the book, and everything in that deal, they own the rights to the book, and everything in the deal.
They own you, basically.
At least they own the part of you that's in that book.
Right.
That's definitely for sure. So we've had some pretty big names. People who've sold 50 to 100,000 copies of books with us come to us and use us because they wanted to control not just the marketing and sales, but they wanted to own all the profits and upside.
You know, having received pretty decent sized checks from publishers, more so than people would expect, I can safely say that in hindsight, I wish that I never took that money, at least for one book that I'm thinking of. I wish I never took the money. I wish that I just would have, because all those years later, they still own it. And, you know, when you get older, you're kind of like, it's kind of like listening to the whole discussion with Prince passing away, how he spent so much time fighting to own the shit. When you're younger, it looks great. Hey, give me a lot of money, give me a lot of money. But when you get older, it starts to matter about legacy. And if a bunch of people in New York City, a bunch of editors and assistant editors and assistant to the assistant editors who come and go every freaking week are in charge of your life, trust me, when you get older, it's not a good feeling.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people, they go with traditional publishing for the status because they feel like, someone important chose me and chose my book. And I always look at those people and I'm like,
that world's over.
Yeah, I know. First off, I laugh at it because it's ridiculous. But then also, a lot of the times those people are entrepreneurs and I'm like, I don't understand. How is it in business you're so smart and so you understand that you've got to go out and hustle and make things work, that being, quote, chosen by Google is not a good thing because it means they're making more money off of you than you are. Why do you not understand that with books?
The publishing business has been a mystery business forever. It's you go to New York City and you talk to these big 5-6 publishers. It's a mystery. And I think when you start to pierce the bubble and let people understand more how things unfold. Amazon, a great piercing. I think what you guys are doing, a great piercing. That really it sheds light on a great opportunity for just about anybody.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
What's the biggest thing that you have learned in this process that we haven't talked about? What have you taken out of this? Give me a story of working with someone you had to convince, or someone who was skeptical who became a true believer. Give me some.
Michael, it's a great question. I've learned a lot about marketing with this company. Like, it's funny. I'm really good at marketing and I've helped a lot of people, but it's one of those things where you can see other people's problems much easier than you can see your own. And when we first started marketing Book in a Box, I was really proud of the process because it really is new and really is revolutionary. And the more that we've improved it, the better it's gotten. And I'm like, once we get this thing working at scale, and we're pretty close, we're going to start creating thousands of books a year that are really going to help a lot of people. And I was super proud of that. And so all of our marketing was focused on me, to be honest. It was the features and benefits of the company. Like, look at how cool our process is. Look at all it. Most people don't care. They don't care how the sausage is made. And so we've had to totally shift our marketing and make it much more about two things. One, about why you want to, how to indirectly ROI a book, which I thought everyone knew, but not everyone does. And the other thing is that totally shocked me, but makes perfect sense once you think about it, is that most people who have great books in them are afraid. They're afraid to do the book. They're definitely afraid to write the book, but it's not, we eliminate the problems with writing. It's not just about writing, even because we take those problems away. They're afraid they're going to look stupid. They're afraid that they don't actually have a good book in them. And they're afraid that, like, if they do something, like, they see a book as an extension of themselves. I've been writing for more than a decade, and I just had forgotten that. I forgot that people ascribe so much deep personal identity to this. And then once I got that, I was like, oh man, because it's true. I mean, we really do. I get it. And we take so much care with these books to make sure that they're right and then all these sort of things. But I forgot how people really, really, really kind of see a book as like a piece of their legacy. And what's crazy is it holds a lot of people back. Right now, we probably have 100 or 200 people who are going to sign with us at some point in the next 2 years, 3 years, that are going to do amazing books, but they're super successful. They're amazing people who've done all this incredible stuff, but they're deathly afraid. They're deathly afraid that their book won't be as good as they think it has to be.
I was afraid not to do the book because I basically told people I was going to do it. And once I put that line down, that line in the sand, that marker, and I said, I'm going to do it, I had to do it or I was a loser.
Yeah. Yeah. Most people aren't like that, man. I mean, I wish that's most people are the other way around. They say, oh, I should write a book, and they never do. And so that was the big thing, man, that like, I'm afraid of a lot of things, but that's not one of them. And so it was hard for me to really relate to that at first. Why someone would be afraid, which is ridiculous because we all have our fears. That's just one that isn't one of mine, you know?
Yeah, you won't want me on the staff motivating people. I'd be terrible. They'd be like, get this guy out of here. He's fucking nuts. Right. So I want to do a contrast question. And this is, look, I'm not trying to get people to come to you. I just think this is such a cool idea. I'm a little bit jealous that I'm not doing it, really. It's a cool idea. But so 20 grand, right? So I think about as an entrepreneur, if I was starting out in this day and age in 2016, 20 years after I put my first website up, I'm thinking, I want to start today. So I'm going to spend 20 grand. Okay, I can go to the local state university, and that's 1 year, maybe a hell of a lot more than 20 grand these days. I can give 20 grand to some self-help guru or some guy that's going to teach me this or that. Those are all predicated on, I don't even know what the end result it is. But when you look and make a comparison to, I'm going to do a book. I'm just talking strictly from my entrepreneurial advantage. The book, having done my first one in 2004, the book is for the amount of money spent. And whether you give it to Tucker or you just do it yourself or however you get it done, comparing that 20 grand, if that's what's going to cost to get a book done, comparing it, the opportunity cost to other things in 2016, I mean, I would really pause if I was sitting out there right now and saying, if everyone can pull 20 grand together one way or another, what are you going to do with it? And what is the best return on your money in this day and age? If you want to make a dent in society, entrepreneurship, business, whatever. I know it's a long, crazy question, but you know where I'm going.
Yeah, no, I agree. The only caveat I would put is that I would tell people you want to make sure to know if you're going to spend 20 grand, if you have to scrape that together, then you should know how it's going to have an idea of how you're going to monetize it, right? Like what is that book in service of? Because for most people, I think you need to think of a book as almost like a marketing cost. So what is it marketing? If you already know your business, if you have your consulting business or your coaching business or your product company or your services company, if the company is up and running, then to me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, most companies spend way more than 20 grand every year on marketing. And a book is way better marketing than almost anything else they do. I'm not sure I would start with a book, especially with us, if you don't know where it's going to go or how it's going to help. Just because, God forbid, you spend 20 grand, we do a great book with you, but then you end up not doing a business in that area or just not serving you in some way. That would kind of be a little bit foolish, I think. Now, listen, if you're swimming in money, you just want to do a book because you want to have something, you have this idea that's burning you up and you want to get it out to the world, no problem. That's great. I'm talking more about people for whom a book is something that needs to produce a direct ROI or an indirect ROI. Just know how you're going to use it. But here's the thing, is that that's the way our process works, is that we talk to, we don't call our salespeople, we call them author consultants. Because I don't pay on commission. The way an author consultant wins is, like, a win for them is helping a person understand if they have a book in them, and if so, how should they get it done? Because some people should not be working with us. Some people should be doing their other paths. There's like 5 other paths you can go. And they're actually trained in all 5 paths. For them, a win is getting someone on one of the 6 paths towards getting a book. And one of the paths is not doing a book, because not everyone should do it. Once they get someone on a path, that's a win for them, not a commission-based thing. For most of your listeners probably, I would say, have ways to indirectly ROI it, but just be careful. If you're just some dude working at Verizon hoping to like become an entrepreneur, I don't know if you start with a book.
Let me jump to you a little bit. I'm curious. So this is your baby right now. I know you probably got your hands involved in several things that I don't know about one way or the other, but I'm curious from a legacy standpoint, looking into the future. Do you have future books in you, and where will you go? What is your thinking? What do you want to scribe out at some point in the future, if anything?
Yeah, I'll be honest. Right now, I don't have anything. I have this company and my family, obviously, my wife and son, and she's got another one coming. So, or we do. No, dude, this company has done really well. We've done, 3.5, almost 4 million in 18 months, and we haven't even really done much marketing, man. We had to build this to scale it took us about a year to get it ready, like to really get the system set up. I think this could be really big, and this is what I've been, not just big, but like, I don't mean big like it can make a bunch of money. Of course I mean that, but I mean like, I think we could make a major impact on a lot of people's lives, both the authors and readers. That's super exciting to me, dude. That's where I quit angel investing. Like I was a serious angel investor for 4 or 5 years. I got into like 80 companies. I put like $1.5 million in a bunch of companies. I quit, and then it's funny, Tim quit right after me. He saw the exact same thing I did from we invest in a lot of different sectors. This is pretty much all I do. And I'll tell you why this is so exciting to me. Like, to answer your question, where I think the world's going. Because I think that I think we're moving to away from a world of large corporations and towards a world of, you can call it the gig economy if you want, but I think a huge number of people are going to essentially cobble together income streams, multiple income streams, 4, 5, 6 different ones from different things. And I think a lot of people are going to start working, I think as bots and as robots, and automation at all levels is going to start taking away a lot of jobs. And I think in the long term, it's going to be good, but in the short term, it's going to create a lot of disruption. Almost everyone who works in a non-physical labor type job is going to have to, in some way, shape, or form, become a thought leader or deal with ideas. And if you deal with ideas, it means you have to deal with marketing, and it means you have to deal with media, and you have to have a platform.
Hey, are you organic right now? Have you had to take money from anybody?
Oh no, totally. I'm not taking any money from anybody. No. We're gonna for as long as possible. We're gonna be privately, closely held. The only owners right now are me and Zach. No, what I think we could do, honestly, is as more and more people get into sort of creating, sharing ideas through books or other things, they're going to have to understand story, and they're going to have to understand media and content, and they're going to have to learn how to build platforms. And I think a company that essentially turns ideas into finished products for people, I think can be a massive thing, and can not just be big, but can help the world. Because if you're smart and you have good ideas, you don't want to worry about how do I build a website? How do I turn my idea into a book? How do I, these are all things that someone else can know and can do for you. If you can just focus on your ideas. It's sort of like how you don't learn how to do plumbing, you hire a plumber. I think we're trying to create the company that does this for media and for marketing and platforms. We're not going to come up with the ideas, but we're going to be the ones that turn your ideas into finished things like books or speeches or screenplays or whatever you want to call it. There's a process to it.
Well, I tell you what, our next conversation might have to be the podcast brainstorm conversation, because this is the medium that I've been in for 4 years now as a side project. I have no idea where it's going exactly, but I know the popularity of it, and audiobooks, for example, is just absolutely exploding. The way that people, and you mentioned that your service includes the audiobook component, but the way people are consuming audio is a real game changer in the last bunch of years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's companies now that kind of do all the work for podcasting. I'm not sure if we're going to get into that, but dude, iPhones have totally changed how people consume and deal with content. I actually think for serious, whatever you want to call it, thought leaders, you're going to have to exist. If you really want to do it right, you're going to have to exist on multiple platforms. And most people don't want to have to deal with, it's a lot of work. You essentially are going to have your own media company. I think we're going to end up becoming, we called the company In a Box, not Book in a Box, on our registration documents, because ultimately we're going to basically become media company in a box. And we'll have each different division, books, like speeches, etc. So people can just do one-off a la carte. But people like you who are big deals and who have large audiences and who are essentially media companies in and of themselves, we want to try and build essentially the back office, like as back office as a service.
I just hired a guy. He's really good. And I just hired a guy to do 3 of my books as audiobooks. There were only 3 of the 4 were not. And, it was the kind of a random, another guy that had sold a lot of books, basically gave me some names and just randomly happened. But I think that even for my situation, if somebody was more helping me, leading me to the way, I mean, look, I've got the written part done, I've got the books published, but as a guy who was missing the audiobook component, there was not really an easy path to figure that out. I kind of got lucky falling into it.
Yeah, there's some companies that do that too. Audiobooks, there's a couple of other, audiobooks.com, a couple of others. I'm not sure we're going to go in that path. We may or we may not.
Yeah.
To me, the more important thing is the overarching platform. It's almost like you want to call it like thought leader in a box. Like imagine if someone were to look at like you or like Gary Vaynerchuk or whatever and say, okay, I have all the ideas to be that person and I can even make money off of all this. I just don't want to build a media company. What do I do?
That's a great idea. That really, you're right, because you're starting with books, but the natural progression for all these people that start with you is to really take it to the next level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Let me let you run. Where can we send everybody? Bookinabox.com?
Bookinabox.com. Yep.
Easy enough. Tucker, thank you for taking some time today.
Of course, man. Thank you for having me, dude.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.